Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton defend their home turf.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News, Kathy Kandinsky, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Derek Clay, Democratic strategist, and Mike Gonadakis, Republican strategist.
If John Kasich can't make it there in New York, he can always try to make it in Pennsylvania. A win in Tuesday's New York primary is likely out of the question, so Ohio's governor is hoping for a strong second to deny Donald Trump at least some delegates in his home state. Without naming Trump specifically, Kasich warned New York Republicans about nominating him.
Some who feed off of the fears and the anger that is felt by some of us and exploit it feed their own insatiable desires for fame or attention. That could drive America down into a ditch and not make us great again.
Here is where the race stands. Trump leads, but is short of a majority. Ted Cruz is closing in a little, and John Kasich is far behind, but at least they don't have to worry about one possible interloper.
Count me out. I simply believe that if you want to be the nominee for our party, to be the president, you should actually run for it. I chose not to do this. Therefore, I should not be considered, period, end of story.
Mike Gonadakis, this, I think, for the week, is by far the best news for John Kasich. An establishment alternative to Donald Trump is not running, so that opens the door a little bit wider for John Kasich.
And you hit the nail on the head. And can we just leave Paul Ryan alone? I mean, the guy's got a busy job. I was with former Speaker John Boehner last week, and he was just lamenting how lonely and hard it is to be the Speaker. So let's let Paul Ryan do what Paul Ryan does best. As it relates to our great governor, I think at the end of the day, who wins these states going forward really doesn't matter. It's just the delegate count, as we've discussed before. But for the governor, he will come in a strong second, as you mentioned. I think this begins a long, slow fade for Ted Cruz. But ultimately, John Kasich has three paths. He's either going to win on the third, fourth ballot at the convention and then go on to be president as the polling shows he beats Hillary Clinton. He's going to play kingmaker in Cleveland, or he's going to set himself up to run in 4 years from now. Keep in mind, in 4 years from now, he's still 2 years younger than Hillary Clinton is today. He would only be 67. She's 69.
A win would be nice, though, one of these primaries, wouldn't it?
Well, sure it would, but when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, it's finishing. Donald Trump's going to win New York. We know that, and he's going to do well in other states, too. So I don't think winning does anything more than gives people on talk shows something to talk about.
All right.
Yeah.
Listen, he is dead last in the delegate count. His funds are low, and the only conversation that we need to be having at this point is about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Those are going to be the nominees.
I don't know about that. I think that if Donald Trump falls short of 1,237, then he is not going to get the nomination. And I think it's going to be Cruz or Kasich who maneuver behind the scenes to whip votes from the delegates, and it's going to be very chaotic. But I really don't. I don't know if Trump's got it yet.
Well, it's certainly, for Kasich, it's all about building momentum going into the convention. A win would be nice. A win would be really desirable. Some strong second place finishes help. Some delegates help. But ultimately, if Trump is close to the delegate count, if he hits it or if he's close, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to take the nomination away from him.
He has to get to at least 1,100 for it to be close, in my opinion. Anything short of that, it's wide open.
Trump has to get to 1,100 delegates.
Yes.
Now, some polls, Ted Cruz is neck and neck with John Kasich in New York. Other polls have Kasich ahead by 5 or 6 points. What are you worried that Ted Cruz might pull off a second in New York?
He won't. He damaged himself at the final debate talking about New York values, or however he mocked people in New York. But I think the game is really set and over for Ted Cruz as it relates to the upcoming states here on April 19th and April 26th. The New England states, northeastern states. Yeah. So I'm not too worried about Ted Cruz as it relates to John Kasich.
If Trump wins all of New York's delegates, does that give him a huge leg up on getting to at least close to 1237, if not give him a real shot at clearing the House for this nomination?
I think Trump has the momentum right now, and a strong win in New York is going to be very good for his campaign. I just don't see how our governor can make that can make up the delegate count to get to the 1237 or get even remotely close to
Yeah,
it.
I think the win in New York is really important for Trump because he's had some bad weeks. He's had a few bad weeks. He's kind of stepped in it a little bit. He had some trouble with his campaign manager, although those charges were dropped just this week. But I think it's really crucial for Trump to kind of get the momentum back. He needs a strong win in New York, strong win in Pennsylvania, and it looks like he could get both.
John Kasich keeps pointing to history, talking about races from 100 years ago, Laura, where Republican nominees were chosen from the field at the convention. But it's a totally different era now, where the voters really, in theory anyway, have a strong voice on who the nominee is going to be. Can you really use cases from 100 years ago?
I think you're right. It's a different day, but I think the general structure of how they pick delegates through primaries and caucuses and state conventions has been structurally about the same. I think, he has a very narrow. He still has a possible path to the nomination, but it's pretty narrow. So I think he has to argue these historic cases.
How about Trump's complaint, Mike, that it's rigged? Of course it's rigged. But it was rigged, when they set the rules 4 years ago, and they're going to change the rules in July, and it'll be rigged again.
They will. There is no revised code section or federal register that dictates it. It's up to the party how we elect our nominee. It's up to the Democrat Party how they elect their nominee. They have superdelegates. We don't. So when Trump throws out these many wild accusations, this one about being rigged, I mean, it's shallow and baseless. It's just more fodder.
I think the average person, though, when they look at it, and if you look at a person who's won all these states, whatever it ends up to be, and you look at someone who's compiled all these delegates at the end of the day, and they don't get the nomination, it causes a problem. People have a distrust in the system, even though you want to tell them, well, there are these rules, well, there's these other ways to get the nomination. I think to the average person who doesn't dive into all that stuff,
Yeah.
it doesn't look fair.
I went to the polls
think,
and I voted. Why doesn't it count?
Why doesn't that count?
But
Exactly.
Hillary Clinton won the popular vote over Barack Obama in the primary in 2008, but he had the delegates. So if that wasn't rigged, then it is what it is. You need the delegates. That's all that matters.
I do think that this message of it's rigged or I'm getting shoved aside, that the party insiders don't want me, that is a message that plays well with Trump's core supporters. And so
And
I
then
think
you
he
run
wants
the
to keep
risk.
fanning it.
And then what if he runs an independent? A lot of people think if that happens, he should run as an independent. What does that do? I mean, the Republicans are in a real box. Yeah. They really have to walk a fine line to make it look like the process is fair. Not make the process fair, perhaps, would be a good what I should say.
That'd be the ideal, have a fair process. Both. John Kasich caused a bit of a stir today when he was answering a question by a young woman at a campaign rally, a town meeting, when she asked him how he could protect her from sexual assault on campus, and his first response was she should not go to parties where there's a lot of alcohol. Then he went on to say about rape crisis centers and rape victim testing kits and things like that. But the first answer, Kathy, shifted the blame a bit to the victim and said that she played a role.
That's exactly right. He said, quote, "I'd also like to give you one bit of advice. Don't go to parties where there's a lot of alcohol." Well, that's not necessarily bad advice, but it makes it sound like she's somehow victimizes her again. I mean, like it's somehow her fault. You have to be careful when you're talking about stuff like this to send that kind of a message, and I think it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I don't think that the governor maybe intended it as it sounded, but it didn't sound good.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that he intended it at all, but anytime that you're running for this higher profile office, you have to be careful about any type of statement you make, and you have to think before you speak.
You have to show that you can empathize with the folks you're talking about, and it didn't seem like he was.
This is the third minor gaffe. The first one he asked the woman about her Taylor Swift fandom, and then he talked about how he pulled women out of the kitchen to help him on his first campaign. Now it's a bit of a pattern.
Well, I don't know if it's a pattern. It's 3 statements and months and months and months of every day having spotlight on you. So I think he's got a pretty good track record on being calm, cool, and collective running for president. But, when I heard the statement, and I didn't watch it live, but, my daughter's 9 years old. We don't go into that deep of a dive yet, but someday I will. And it's talking about your environment, where you are, making sure you're in safe places. So I think that's what he meant. I think we collectively agree. It's just, unfortunately, as Derek said, you're running for president. You got to be very careful.
We should say the Kasich campaign tweeted out within an hour or so, saying that the number one person responsible for a sexual assault is the assailant, and then clarified, the governor's stance on this and pointed to his record.
It does sort of kind of point to John Kasich does have a pattern of being a little bit awkward and clumsy in some of his statements, and I think he probably could have fixed it up pretty quickly by saying it's a good idea for both parties to cool it on the alcohol, and then also say the number one responsible party is the assailant, not the victim.
The good news, bad news is this is hardly making news nationally.
Oh, there's so much.
Because
there's so many outrageous things going on that this is like nothing.
And he's, they're still talking about last night's debate and Ted Cruz's speech in front of people eating dinner, and it just shows you the state of this campaign.
Yeah, I think if it was Donald Trump or Ted Cruz that would have said that comment, then they would have got a lot more airtime. But seeing that the governor is in last in terms of delegate count on the Republican end, maybe it didn't.
All right, Bernie Sanders is basically in a must-win situation if he has any hope of overtaking Hillary Clinton in the Democratic nomination fight. Even though Sanders has won the last several contests, Clinton has a very big lead in delegates, primarily thanks to committed party leaders and elected officials who serve as super delegates. The two candidates met for a critical debate in Brooklyn. It was a tense 2 hours. They clashed often, like this time, over how tough each candidate has been on Wall Street and big banks.
I stood up against the behaviors of the banks when I was a senator. I called them out on their mortgage behavior. I also was very willing to speak out against some of the special privileges they had under the tax code.
Secretary Clinton called them out. Oh my goodness. They must have been really crushed by this. And was that before or after you received huge sums of money by giving speaking engagements behind them? So they must have been very, very upset by what you did.
Kathy Kandinsky, from the tone of last night's debate, you get the feeling that Bernie Sanders thinks he can win and that Hillary Clinton is taking him very seriously.
I think so. I mean, it's true, as you said in the intro, that she's very, very far ahead and that his chances are slim. He obviously needs a big win in New York to try and catch up. But nobody has more enthusiastic supporters than he does. He's raising all kinds of money. And the entertainment value, I mean, he's sharp. I mean, he's great on the stump. He gets, people riled up. He's bringing up issues that matter to a lot of people and making her answer to those issues. So she has to take him seriously. I think that last night's debate, I mean, you think all the fun is going on the Republican side. Not so. Yeah. There's just as much fun for the Democrats this year.
If it wasn't for Donald Trump, it would be Hillary Clinton would be the story this year. In her, her perceived struggles in getting Democrats to support her.
And
Absolutely.
At the end of the game, I mean, I'm sorry, she's going to have to figure out a way to get those Sanders supporters on her side. I mean, she wants those enthusiastic voters, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out as we get close to the convention.
I agree with that because Sanders supporters are so diehard Bernie Sanders, and they don't care if he's going to be the nominee or not. They're supporting him, and he is right on her heels. So she's definitely going to have a fight in New York.
I would argue that there's not a really big gulf in between the delegate count because she's leading because of superdelegates. Superdelegates are not bound to her. They are not compelled to vote for Hillary Clinton. They said, yeah, we'll vote for you, Hillary, so she puts them in her column. But come convention time, if Bernie's won 7 of 8 primaries, if he continues to do very well and continues to get the enthusiasm, they can simply say, we're done, Hillary, we're going this way. So it could be a contested convention as well in the Democrat side.
It would be a major collapse for her campaign if she loses the superdelegates. I mean, with the superdelegates, she's got 1,758 and Sanders has got 1,069. So she's, almost doubled him.
Would losing New York be catastrophic for Hillary Clinton? She has a decent lead now.
She has a 13-point lead.
Yeah, she has a lead in New York, but that would be catastrophic for her campaign if she lost New York, where a state where she served as U.S. Senator, and she would lose that state, a state where she resides. That would be definitely detrimental to her campaign.
But now it's the expectation game. She can't just win. She has to actually spike the football a little bit because, as you said, it's her state. She was the senator there, so she can't just win by 1 or 2 points and call it a victory. That's a loss. So she has to win pretty big.
But because Democrats delegate, or their delegates, proportionally, either way, no one's going to have a huge delegate advantage coming out of New York, unless there's a surprise.
It's not going to change that much because I forget the numbers, but there's so many delegates that the winner gets, but most of them, like 2/3 of the delegates, are then split. So yeah, nobody's going to make huge gains in delegate counts coming out of this if it's as close as they're saying it's going to be. The polls are indicating it's like a 12 or 13 point spread at this point. Probably will tighten up. So
I think there's 291 delegates in New York, and they're awarded proportionally.
Hillary Clinton has been pretty effective, I think, in getting the message out there that Bernie Sanders' key campaign stances really are unrealistic. Breaking up the big banks, free college tuition for all, single-payer health care. Derek, is she finally getting some traction there? People starting to realize, even his core supporters, that these things are kind of pie in the sky?
So, a lot of his policies are pie in the sky, but that's what his supporters want to see. They want to see breakup of the big banks and making sure that we have affordable education for all people. But the realistic notion of those things happening, Hillary is definitely, winning that argument with core voters.
So what's a better campaign strategy in a primary? Pragmatism or idealism?
Well, I think idealism usually is what appeals to your base, and swinging for the fences and thinking grand and trying to be inspirational.
you're seeing that on both sides this year.
Yeah. All right. Remember how Ted Strickland did not want to debate his Democratic challenger even once? Well, now that Strickland has dispatched P.G. Sittenfeld, he wants to debate a lot. Strickland has asked Republican Rob Portman to debate him 5 times in locations around Ohio. Portman says he will debate Strickland, but he has not committed to a number. Derek Clay, how many debates really is Ted Strickland hoping for with Rob Portman?
I think as many as possible.
He's asked for 5. Is he hoping for 2?
Yeah,
3?
I think maybe 3. I think maybe 3. One of course in Central Ohio and then in other parts of the state. But I think that the former governor clearly sees that there is a way that he can win this race, and so he wants to talk to as many voters as possible. And the debates are the best way to do that.
Well, if they're the best way to do that, why didn't he debate P.G. Sittenfeld just once? He would have spoken to a lot of voters in that thing.
Yeah, well, he dismissed Councilman Sittenfeld because he clearly saw that he could win the primary. So he didn't feel like he should debate to try to expose, to have Councilman Sittenfeld
have him be on the same stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He didn't have to. Now he has to. I mean, there's no question that the Democrats are targeting Portman, and depending on who's on the top of the ticket, Portman could be vulnerable. So it's a good strategy for Strickland to get be side by side with him as much as he can.
It is going to be a high-profile national race. It's going to pull in a lot of money already. I think it's drawn, I think, more than $11.5 million in outside spending. So it's I think the debates are crucial for Strickland. Even though I think they're kind of neck and neck in the polls, Strickland might still have a little bit of an edge. Portman's got a huge fundraising edge. So this is a race that could go either way.
I was a little surprised that Rob Portman, within an hour of the press release coming out from the Strickland camp, they said, yeah, we'll debate. They didn't say how many, but Portman didn't hesitate. Does that surprise you, Mike, that he didn't at least give it a couple days and wait and say, well, we'll discuss this summer, whatever?
No, I think it was a clear sign of strength by Senator Portman. 6 years ago, they were saying, Lee Fisher's got this great chance and Portman's not going to win, and Portman trounced Lee Fisher back in the day. And the same thing will happen this time, money advantage. Look, Rob Portman got the most votes, more votes than John Kasich on March 15th in the primary. Ohioans, Republicans, and others support Rob Portman, and he'll easily get reelected this year.
Ted Strickland this week said he wants to lift the cap. Social Security now, the cap is at $118,000 salary. You don't have to pay Social Security taxes on earnings above that. He says tax earnings above $118,000, that'll help solve the Social Security liquidity problem. Is that a good plan? Is that a plan that would cost or gain him votes in Ohio?
I think it's a plan that we should certainly talk about and investigate to see if that's something that can save Social Security.
Well, Republicans say this is just a taxing Ted Strickland, going to tax your income?
Well, I don't think it matters at the end of the day because it's not going to happen. Whether it should or shouldn't, we can debate that later. But what we need to do to fix Social Security isn't just taking more money from Americans. It's actually fixing a broken system that doesn't work. That's what we need to do. But he won't. He's afraid to touch that in the entitlements, and he's afraid that he'll upset his base. So he just goes to the easiest low-hanging fruit, which is tax the rich.
Well, a broken system that the Republicans, of course, created.
Interesting. Interesting.
But if you're on Social Security now, you're not saying it's broken. I mean, down the road, if it goes broke, it might be broken, of course. But
Well, it is. I mean, it's unfunded. I mean, they've taken the money. Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, have stole from the Social Security system. That is a fact, and both parties have, and now we're in the mess we're in now.
It's going to run out of money by, I think they're speculating about 2030. So this is a problem that voters, I think, on both sides of the aisle want to see resolved. We'll have to hear, I mean, I don't know how much they'll dive into the plans, but talking about the issue certainly is going to help Strickland.
okay, so what, 2028 election will get solved? That we're thinking?
Probably 2030.
It's a lot easier to start fixing it now than wait.
Absolutely.
That's not going to.
Easy's no fun.
Easy's
Come on.
no fun.
Listening to overwhelming support for medical marijuana and faced with 2 ballot proposals, Ohio lawmakers are poised to seriously consider legalizing medical pot. A House-appointed task force has come up with a plan that could become law. The key elements: only licensed doctors would be able to prescribe it. Most forms of medical marijuana, including edibles, would be legal, except homegrown pot. That would be prohibited. A 9-member marijuana control commission would operate like the Liquor Control Commission, and it would have a year, the commission would, to write rules on manufacture and distribution. That means legal medical pot could still be 2 years away.
To the folks that are still pursuing ballot initiatives, this has not been a stall tactic. This has been an issue to which we've taken very seriously. It's an issue to which we're giving a lot of time and dedication to. This is the people's house, and we're responding to the citizens of the state of Ohio that have expressed interest in medical marijuana and the purposes. But we need to ensure that we're doing it the right way, that takes in opportunity and time, and this task force has given us that opportunity.
Laura Bischoff, there have been medical marijuana bills in the past. They seem more serious this time.
Well, the previous medical marijuana bills have been very, very narrowly tailored. This is a much broader proposal. However, it still probably doesn't go as far as a lot of the advocates for legalization would like to see. Like, there's no home grow. It's questionable whether or not patients would be allowed to smoke it. They say it would be allowed in edibles, patches, oils, and plant products. But when asked, does that include smoking, it was like, well, it's to be determined. And also, there's going to be like a 90-day limit on the recommendations from doctors for this stuff. So this means that the patient would have to keep going back to the doctor to get a recommendation. That said, I think that the lesson that they're applying here is gambling. The casino gambling issue there was a lot of pressure for it for years and years and years. It went to the ballot several times, and then finally it passed. And if the lawmakers had recognized and seen the writing on the wall, and they could have written in a gambling casino plan and had a lot more control over it. But instead they waited and waited and waited, and then it went to the ballot, and the operators of the casinos wrote the rules.
Is this too restrictive, too much control to appease the folks who want to legalize medical marijuana and marijuana in general?
I think so. I mean, I think obviously it is. I think that what Laura's point to, the legislature would write it in a more restrictive way. The people that have proposed ballot initiatives, there's 2 that they're looking at. One a little more broad. The bottom line is that Ohio polls show that most people support the use of marijuana for medicinal purposes. So, it's going to happen one way or another. So whether the legislature does it or whether the ballot issues succeed. But I think what'll be interesting is to see what happens if they do pass a bill. What happens to the ballot initiatives? Do they get passed too? Do they trump the law? How does that all play out?
They're kind of the schedule is on a collision course because the lawmakers want to pass this before they go on summer break in June, and the ballot issues, they're trying to collect 306,000 valid signatures by July 6th. So that it's all going to come to a head in June, July. And the other thing is they'll be sending, this is interesting, they'll be sending that bill to the governor for signature just before he goes into the Republican convention. And so it's going to be, depending on the details, it might be something that maybe he lets it go into law without a signature, or...
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Would the amendment on the ballot trump the state law, though? So if the voters...
the constitutional amendment trumps state law.
So if they get on the ballot and voters approve it, that would trump whatever the lawmakers do.
Right. But I think it would take a lot of wind out of the sails.
Yeah. No workplace, no exceptions for workplace. If you suffer from glaucoma and a doctor prescribes you marijuana, you work at a place that's a drug-free workplace, they can not allow you to work there. Is that fair, according to this bill?
Well, absolutely it is. If you're a truck driver, you're a doctor, or you're taking care of my kids at daycare, heck no, you're not going to be smoking marijuana. Look, both these ballot initiatives are hot messes. It's basically responsible Ohio all over again. The legislature has to do something. The House has a version that does have smoking in it, by the way. The House version does. We don't know what the Senate says yet. I think they'll be more conservative in their approach. But at the end of the day, Mike, I still have not read one article in the New England Journal of Medicine or the AMA saying that there's such thing as medicinal marijuana.
Okay,
it's a great marketing tactic.
So to get to our off-the-record comments, Mike, up first.
Yeah, I think the sleeper issue in 2016, at least here in Central Ohio, is going to be a strong, organized, and well-funded effort to expand voting and representation at City Hall. We almost have enough signatures to go to ballot, and we're going to get rid of the scandals at City Hall by increasing the wards in Columbus.
Derek.
So we saw the end of an era with Kobe Bryant retiring this week, but it begs the question, why don't we have NBA in Columbus? We have the venue, and we definitely can accommodate the team. We just need the will of the corporate community and public backing.
2 words, Dan Gilbert. Kathy.
Well, this is a heads up, in addition to the marijuana bill, we've got 3 or 4 abortion bills coming through the legislature. I expect those as well will be passed by June 1st. Looking at, as you know, outlawing abortion after 20 weeks, Down syndrome diagnosis, and then a bill dealing with fetal remains.
And Laura.
It seems like we have debate fatigue. The debate season seems to have been lasting longer than the NBA season. But I would like to remind people that the first general election debate will be at Wright State University in Dayton. Check out DaytonDailyNews.com for all the details.
And Cleveland has put in a request for the feds to help with security for the convention. It includes hay for their horses, which leads one to ask, would they not feed the horses if it were not for the federal money? That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Facebook, Twitter, and our website, WOSU.org. For our crew and for our panel, have a good week.